Hello, good evening, welcome, and I need to first apologize. There was a technical hitch, and we were not being able to connect to the Facebook page. I personally am not on Facebook, so I had to get on to the Bloomsbury base. So I just wanted to say what a pleasure it was right at the beginning. That it's a pleasure to be with you today. It's a pleasure to welcome you to the Bloomsbury Book Club series, of which this is the first talk about a book that was published in 2019, a book titled Are You Prepared for a Disaster? I have a copy of the book right here, and that's how it looks. This book was born out of a desire to enhance awareness about disasters when I was Additional Secretary in the Government of India in Ministry of Home Affairs. I am an IS officer of the 1986 batch, born on Haryana cadre. So while I was in Haryana as a Deputy Commissioner Rewari, my experience with disasters began then. In a landlocked state, the kind of disasters you have are mainly pertaining to droughts and floods. Sometimes urban flooding was an issue, and dust storms were another issue because we were on the thing. And then there was this one incident where 5 children died in a terrible accident, and it was a fire that erupted in a haystack. And these children, in fact, clung to each other because there was no one there to save them. And it took those images kind of just stayed in my mind. The first major disaster I ever saw was the tsunami. I was on the shores of Nagapattinam on 28th of December 2004, and those terrible images, the smell of burning carcasses, of animals, of bodies, of lost people, has stayed with me forever. And somehow I just always wanted to work in the area. Maybe that's why I was posted as Additional Secretary of Disaster Management. And as soon as I landed, the Kerala floods happened. And my God, what a great calamity that was. A massive experience. My job entailed basically policy intervention, but then whenever any kind of calamity, any disaster was too large for the state government to cope, it was my job to help in rescue and manage the relief elements that are post-disaster. This book, in fact, Are You Prepared for a Disaster? The seeds began somewhere there, because we had a training need analysis that was conducted prior to a training or a capacity building of teachers. And sorry, that's my dog. He needs to go. School age of beta. And so the training that was conducted was about 50 odd teachers, and a question I asked them, was because we've just been through a major calamity, and so I said, suppose the children that you were taking care of were, there is an earthquake warning, what would you actually do? And I gave them 4 options. I felt very bad to see that not a single one could answer correctly. And I came back. Now that's not the story. I came back and told a friend who was quite a senior level officer in a multinational. I said that, this is what happened today. So this person heard me out and then looked at me and said, so what should she have answered? What should they have answered? Because I don't know myself. And that was when I started to think. Because indeed, a lot of us, all of us, don't know enough. And so I decided to write the book. The book is about various hazards that are seen in India. Basically, the backdrop is India. My case studies, my experiences are India specific, but whatever has been written about preparedness, about disaster risk reduction, about various ways of ensuring that you know what to do before, during and after a disaster are statements which are applicable globally to any form. So the book begins with two introductory chapters following the author's note, which basically talk about what disasters are, what is a hazard, and how various governments put together policy, put together programs and protocols to ensure that we are a less vulnerable society, which is not prone to too much risk. And then I have about 11 odd chapters dealing with earthquakes, with tsunami, with a separate one for each, for fire, a separate chapter for hydrometeorological, floods, cyclones, urban floods, cloudbursts, lightning, each one requiring a different protocol. And then there is a chapter on chemical, nuclear and radiological disasters, and chapter 10 of the book, for instance, talks about what we are going through today. Biological disasters, which are basically dealing with biological warfare, biological terrorism, epidemics, pandemics of the nature that we see today, and of course an accidental leak of virulent material, bacterial or microbiological material. So, and of course there are a large number of appendices which tell you, there are some case studies there. There are, for instance, you would find a typical emergency kit for a community, for an office, for a family. You'll find a medical kit that you need to have in the house. You'll have also find protocols that are being laid down, because we are now in this COVID-19. I'd like to talk about that. Protocols that are being laid down by the National Disaster Management Authority, dealing with what needs to be done with regard to test kits and what has to form a part of the test kit and certain other details. Of course, at the end, there is a who's who directory, which is whom to contact within India. As I said, it is more, the backdrop is India and applicable across the world. So that is what the book is all about, and that is what really my motivation to write the book is about. I have received, I can even see on my screen, a few questions, but there are some that were given to me, which have come from the last few days when this talk was talked about by Bloomsbury. Incidentally, they also did a small survey in which they found, to the question, are you prepared for a disaster? 86% people reported no, and it was only 14% who said yes. So obviously, I would recommend the book, not merely because I've written it, also because it gives you the ability to actually have control over your life, ensure the safety of those you love and care for, your family, your friends, the community at large, and people you're actually responsible for in office, schools, colleges, wherever. The questions I'm going to start reading one by one. The first one is a question that has been received from a gentleman called, okay, this is a more it's to try to learn about it. A gentleman called Manoj Vashisht. The query is, so what is a disaster? And how are man-made disasters different from natural disasters? Okay, a disaster, the word disaster itself comes from the French word désastre, and which again comes from the Italian word disastro. Basically, there are two words, disasters and hazard. So there are hazards that happen, hazards that you have no control over. And a hazard is a situation which can actually, if blown out, develop into a disaster. So India is prone and vulnerable to about 12 hazards that have been declared as national vulnerabilities, and state-specific vulnerabilities are also there. A disaster, in fact, is a situation where the lives of the society and the community is disrupted. The life of the society and community is disrupted in a manner in which the human, the economic, the environment is disturbed, and there are losses. I'm just breaking it up so that you get all the elements in. There are losses, loss of life, there could be loss of property, there could be loss of the environment, environmental degradation, and this happens to such an extent that it is beyond the capacity of the local community to cope with it. Then it is termed as a disaster. And I've often said something that becomes a little controversial. No disasters are natural. All disasters are man-made, because even the natural hazards that you have, if you're able to prepare and work to reduce the reduction of the vulnerable group, of the group that is at risk, the community that is at risk, you can actually avoid that hazard from eventually turning into a disaster. Now, when we've had disasters for a very long time. One of the first ever known cataclysmic event occurred in 430 BC. It was a typhus that occurred, in Athens. And if you look at the number of lives lost over the years, they've continued to decline in the last 100 odd years, and even before. So if you compare to the Shanxi province, that's the first written record of a disaster that occurred in 1700 and 1735, I think it was, and it is they lost about 300,000 lives. The Hola cyclone, which occurred in Calcutta, near Kolkata, prior to independence in 1920s, we lost about 50,000 lives. The great cyclone of Orissa, 1999, 10,000 lives were lost. And then, and this is the beautiful success story, Orissa got their act together, put together a state disaster management authority, put together the protocols, ensured people were evacuated at the right time. And we've had cyclones day in and day out. Now, these are natural hazards. You can't stop them, but you can stop the disaster, because after Kerala, when I remember the first cyclone that occurred was Titli, I remember calling Orissa government, and they turned around and told me, no, we don't really need any help, ma'am. We can manage ourselves. And indeed, they managed to an extent that loss of a life is not really heard anymore. There could be one or two, but not in those large numbers of 10,000. So that's what it is. There is a very, it's typically something that you read in an academic book about natural disasters as against man-made disasters, man-made being the NCRB, the nuclear, chemical, and biological, but biological are again, so there's a very thin line between the two. I wouldn't want to separate into either of those. For instance, urban floods. Now, urban floods are again a phenomenon that is basically because of human intervention. The floods that occurred in 2014 in Srinagar, the drainage system into the Jhelum had been built, encroached upon, large buildings had come up. Similarly in Chennai, which had never seen floods prior to 2017, was it? 2015. They did not, it occurred because there was this construction activity, buildings and houses came up on what were erstwhile ponds, natural drainage areas, and so you have urban floods there. So as I said, there is very little distinction that you can have. Okay, that's the second question that I have. It's sad, it's almost like a monologue. I wish you could ask the questions. But here it is. So Chennai was 2015, definitely. If India is disaster prone, this is a gentleman called Vikram Singh. If India is disaster prone and every day something happens, does the government have a system to help? Yes, Vikram, indeed. The government of India had, you see, prior to 2000, the enactment of the National Disaster Management Act in 2005, most of the reaction was, most of the response to disaster was reaction based. It was a reaction and rather than a preparedness. Preparedness, building better, disaster risk reduction, and dealing with and managing disasters in a more effective manner is something that happened close to after the Act came, the 2005 Act. And then we have the disaster management policy and the plan that came up in 2016, the policy came up in 2009. So you have the national, under which you have the National Disaster Management Authority based out of Delhi, where the Honorable Prime Minister is the chairperson. And you have similar state management, state development, disaster management authorities across all states, all the 35 states and UTs, where the chief minister is, because it's supposed to be a very, very important function, and the chief minister is the chairperson. You have a district disaster management authority headed by the collector at the district level, where you form these disaster management plans. And then you have these processes where every collector, every district magistrate, every subdivision officer prepares well before a disaster is to occur. And we've come a long way, because the IMD, that's the Indian Meteorological Department, along with the CWC, the Central Water Commission, and INCOIS, have been able to predict a large number of hydrometeorological disasters. Now that's something that impacts most of the country well in advance and well on time. So you have even 3-hour nowcasts. Of course, you do have the regular tourist and city predictions that are 7-day prior to the occurrence, and you have nowcasts which are only 3 hours. In fact, our IMD is forecasting for 12 other countries in this region, in the Indian Ocean region, as is the INCOIS, is assisting them. Now, besides this, we have what is called the National Disaster Response Force. It's a force built which is of trained young men who have been trained to deal with disasters of all kinds. They are the first people who come forth and help people out in the event of a disaster, including the biological disasters that we're talking of now, especially the Nipah virus that was seen in Kerala in 2018. So that's where we are. And in terms of economic, financial assistance to the states and to people who are affected, it is done through what is called the NDRF, that's the National Disaster Relief Fund, which is used for assisting people during this event. Okay, I can't read that far. Let me read what they have sent me as something they received earlier. So the third question is, can you share? Okay, I'll take that later. Can I take this one first? India, and for that matter, the entire world, has not faced the current situation in modern times. Going forward, what are some areas that we as a country should be better prepared for? This is a lady called Vrunda Sharma, who also goes by, I think her Twitter handle is the lady who reads or some such thing, and well, here it is. And I am Vrunda, I believe you're talking about the COVID-19 pandemic that we're all facing today. And no, this is not the first time that the world has faced something like this. In fact, I did say initially that in 430 BC, typhus occurred as the first epidemic in Athens. I mean, it's the first known epidemic that we know in Athens. In the Middle Ages, plague was the cause of wiping out several communities in Europe. And then closer to the the last century, 1917, 1918, you had the Spanish flu. Vietnam under the French and India under the British faced plague also. You had that major, the Surat plague was one where we lost a large number of lives. The other epidemics that we've had recently are the HIV, or the human immunodeficiency syndrome, and the acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. Just tell me what the time is, please. Syndrome. There is also the chikungunya that occurred in 2005, and if we're coming closer to viruses, then we've had MERS. In fact, we've had them all in India. We've had MERS, we've had SARS, we've had Nipah. So MERS is the Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome. SARS is the severe acute respiratory syndrome, and they have all been caused by viruses that were coronaviruses, very like the one that we are facing now. However, this is a mutant. It's a totally different virus. So we have no vaccines for it. We know very little about it. The other problem that has occurred is that it has actually not been restricted as an epidemic as MERS and SARS were, or Nipah was. This has spread globally. It's like a pandemic that's gone across nations because of the number of people who travel around the world, because we're in the global world. And yes, it is something for which we need to plan
6:15, what
much more. We need to plan and also build up our immunity, look at those vaccines that various countries are trying to develop, and wait and see. In fact, it is a time which is difficult on all of us, on the entire world, but it will pass. We learn to live with it. We put the other viruses behind us. We're living with them. We learn to live with this as well. The next question that I'm taking up is now, okay, this also deals with COVID. This is Amrita Kumar. With COVID-19 being declared as a pandemic by the WHO, does that mean that we have to live with it on a long-term basis? How could we do so in a country like ours with such overwhelming poverty and pressure on health systems? Amrita, I answered the first part of it in my earlier question. Yes, we will learn to live with it. We will have to learn to live with it. It's not going anywhere. What we need to learn is how to cope with it, how to have better immunity, how to be able to deal with it as we've been able to deal with various other viruses, some similar, some dissimilar. The issue with regard to overwhelming poverty, I agree with you, because if there is one thing that really is a truism, it is that disasters impact the poor in a much worse manner. In fact, I go back to, I could give you several examples, but nothing better than the earthquake in Haiti. Now, the earthquake in Haiti occurred in 2010. And, normally, in fact, I'd like you to know that out of all the deaths that occur in any disaster, the major number of deaths, 60% occur in earthquakes. And 90% of loss of life and accidents in earthquakes are not because of the tremors and the shivers and the cracking up of the ground. They're mostly because of structures falling over human beings. So you would have expected that in the Haiti earthquake also. But what really happened, the major loss of life happened in the poorer areas in Haiti after the earthquake, after the actual disaster, because lack of sanitation, lack of post-disaster management, lack of clean water led to the worst ever epidemic that followed the Haiti earthquake, and a large number of lives were lost, thousands of lives were lost. Many more than what the deaths that occurred in the epidemic. Can I take just one more question, because the half an hour that was promised to me is almost over, and if there are still some questions left towards the end, I shall um, I could respond to you by email if there are some who'd like to address your queries to me. My email ID is Rajni Sekhri Sibal, that's my name, @gmail.com, all small. You will know my name better if you pick up this book and read it. And you will actually learn a lot more. As I said, chapter 10 is entirely devoted to the disaster we're actually facing right now. The last question that I thought I would look at is, okay, I have 3 or 4 more. This is Bhamati Balasubramaniam. Has COVID-19, because COVID-19 happens to be something we're all very concerned about now, has COVID-19 defied all modes of disaster preparedness in India? Does COVID-19 fall into a man-made or a natural catastrophe? Which one? Wow. So, COVID-19 is difficult right now. But I think the governments are doing a tremendous job across the world. They're trying their best, they're working hard. Governments, the first responders in disasters, the community at large, the disaster response forces, they're all trying to do their bit. You and I are all doing our bit because we're actually following the protocols that are set for us. However, sorry? I can take all questions. I can't read all the questions because the phone is too far. I just got that message from Bloomsbury that I should take all questions. But let me just finish this one first. So does COVID-19 fall into a man-made or a natural catastrophe? Okay, that's a tough one. As I said, man-made and natural are, they have a very thin line. So the virus itself is definitely natural, okay? There is a certain set of people who've been talking on the media about the possibility of COVID-19 being used as an being more than what we see. I don't want to comment on that. I really don't want to comment on that because there is no proof here, there is no evidence. But what's most likely is that it was a virus that leaked out of, and it was an accidental leak, I think so, and I'm quite certain that could be the reason, from a laboratory. Can I see the other questions? Okay, so I will, I would just like to now take that one last question that I thought I would leave for later because it asks me. Here it is. This is Namrata, who wants to know that I have read your book. She says, you start your book by saying disasters happen and they happen to people like us. How do we sensitize people and change their mindset of, and inverted commas, this will not happen to me? Is it not going to create panic? And is it not a very morbid thought to keep thinking of a disaster can happen to me? Okay, Namrata, that's a good one, and I thought I'd leave it to the end. So, yes, I do begin the book by saying disasters happen and they happen to people like us. And there is this little statement that I've made when I was referring to a sort of a mock drill that we tried to do in Gurgaon, and I put it, I'm just going to read from the book. A visit to the millennium city of Gurugram, which has developed rapidly in the last decade and a half with its multi-storied buildings and glass facades, worries me. Gurugram falls in seismic zone 4, and I often wonder if the inhabitants of apartments on the 17th floor or the office on the 13th floor, for instance, know what to do in the event of an earthquake or a fire for that matter. This lack of awareness is compounded in some cases by an attitude that can be described as that of an ostrich that hides its head in the sand in the event of impending danger. The mindset is effectively, hazards do not happen to people like me. I am safe in my own little glass house. They affect other less fortunate people. Furthermore, if something doesn't affect me, the argument goes, I don't need to bother myself with knowing about what to do. Unquote. So with that kind of attitude, we land up with a situation where we keep looking at somebody else to assist us in an event where we have so little time to assist ourselves, to help those that we love and care for. I see a lot of questions there, so I don't know if you're able to see my face, but what I wanted to tell you was that I think every human being, all of us, there are two truths. One is the day we are born, the day we die. It's kind of written somewhere and it's beyond our control. And the only thing that we can control is what happens in between, what happens to our lives. Just as we need to be more aware of how to make that life happy, we need to be aware of how to be safe, how to make our homes safe, how to make the communities safe, how to be prepared, how to reduce risk. And why should you want to not know how to actually ensure that the vulnerabilities within the house, within the office, within your school, your college, your institution, wherever you may be, are reduced, because you are able to reduce them. You have the capacity to do so. And in times of trouble, it is you who should be the first responder. It is I who should be the first responder for my own life and the lives of my own children and their health and their safety. And I think it is important for everybody to be aware. I would like to see what happens in Japan happen in my country too. You know, you go to Japan and you visit a primary school. It's a pleasure to see those, you know, if they ring an alarm bell, which signifies, let's say, an earthquake or a tornado. Those little children, they are able to recite the entire SOP, the standard operating procedure of what needs to be done. So if it's an earthquake alarm, then they'll know, they'll say, they speak in Japanese in a sing-song manner, you know. So the bell has rung, I need to look for my helmet. If I don't have a helmet, look for my satchel. If I find the satchel, put it on my head. Don't have the satchel, go under the table. So they're able to say all of that and know it. It's part of the DNA. Just as our children, you know, of that age or a little later are able to, you know, recite the multiplication table, 2 ones are 2, 2 twos are 4. It's a dream. I want every child in India to be able to do that. Every home in India, to be able to be a safer home. Every office, every institute, every community. And with that, I would like to say goodbye. Namaskar. Have a great day.